What's up, guys? Sorry I had to get the treadmill fired up. It was acting weird. Somebody had pulled the stop thing on it. So, if you guys were on the YouTube channel in the past 24 hours, you'll see, if you go back and watch, I did a trap bar versus straight bar deadlift video. And we'll wait for some more people to get tuned in here. What's up, Chad Myers? What's going on? And so, you know, you see a lot of people talking about the advancements or the positives of using a trap bar deadlift. What's going on? What's going on? Just found your channel from Brooklyn. Oh man, I was just in Brooklyn doing a seminar last month. Sucks you missed it. Should have been there, buddy. So for those of you guys that are, a couple announcements. For those of you guys that are on Patreon right now, Patreon is basically bending me over because I posted about peptides. So they have shut my Patreon channel down for review based on the fact that they're trying to treat peptides like a controlled substance or a drug, which it's not. It's a supplement. It's not regulated by the FDA. There's no legal parameters on peptides. It doesn't make any sense. You know, anywhere you go on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, you're going to see tons of stuff on peptides. And so they've got my channel on review right now, which means I can't get into it, and none of the other members can get into it. So what a pain in the ass, which is crazy for people like me, where that's a decent amount of my income, and they're just going to lock it up and not even email me and ask me, you know, to take the peptide stuff down or whatever their thought processes are. They just basically take my channel and just pause it and put it on review. So if you guys are on Patreon, I apologize. I can send you guys the workouts. Just text me and I'll let you, I'll get them to you on file. So back to our original topic. Straight bar versus trap bar deadlifts. If you go watch the video that I just posted, it's going to come up with some very unique insight into coaching of why I feel the straight bar deadlift has a little bit more safety in some ways than the trap bar deadlift. So Kobe, I think people saying to avoid deadlifts is a simple cop-out. I think what it is that they don't understand proper mechanics, they don't develop the right muscles before they deadlift, and they really don't know the technique on how to perform the deadlift effectively. We have people at the gym that are pushing 70 years old that deadlift every week. So if it was really harmful for you, do you think that I would have people do it? The answer would be no. I think the harmful thing is that people push too hard, too fast with improper technique by themselves in either a garage gym or a local gym without the right coaching, without the right expert advice of when to stop, when to progress. I don't think in general, unless we're talking some CrossFit exercises, I don't think that most exercises are dangerous. I think the preparation for the exercise is what causes the danger and the problem. So if I have a person that has really inactive glutes, bad hamstrings, very low control of lower back, we're not going to start with a deadlift. And even if we do, we're not going to start it with it very heavy until we master technique. But the problem with most stuff, fitness oriented, is that nobody has a long-term mindset on how to get better. If you were to come into one of my fire departments and train, other than teaching the form on a squat, you're not going to squat with a straight bar or anything on your back until you master the belt squat machine. Once you master the belt squat machine and get all the form perfect from the hips down, then we'll work on putting a bar on your back. The point being is that there's a learning curve to how the body functions under those different types of stressors. And so if you get the glutes activated and the hamstring strong and the posterior chain potentiated and the core muscles ready, there's nothing wrong with deadlifting or squatting or any of that shit, right? Pulling right off and twist while you do. I don't know about that, buddy. Channels talk about peptides 90% of the time. I know. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm not sure why Patreon has busted my balls, put my channel in review, and basically paused it because of that. And even so, I think it's interesting that you would think that they would just email me and be like, hey, we don't approve of peptide usage as a company. Can you please take that stuff down? That would have been the professional way to do it. Instead, they just lock it down. So I'm heavily contemplating completely trashing Patreon and putting all my stuff on TrainHeroic and just running an Elite Conjugate group out of that. So anyway, what people don't think about with the trap bar deadlift, especially with the handles up, is that it becomes mostly a leg and back exercise. And the reason is because your hamstrings and your glutes work more the farther down you are. So for a lot of people, when you do trap bar deadlifts, you should do them with the handles down so that you have to get in a more squatty position. That's one thing. The next thing is, with the straight bar deadlift, if you're pulling it correctly, the lift is going to be initiated with the lats, and then you're going to pull the weight into your thighs and your shins, giving you proprioception on where that bar is located. On a trap bar, it's like driving a school bus with a big steering wheel. You can be rotating really easy. So I find that the trap bar tends to increase shear force because it's easier to rotate because you don't have anything to pull against you and keep you in tight. So on a straight bar, you're supposed to drag it up your legs the entire way. If you look at great deadlifters, a lot of times after a deadlift session, their shins and their shins especially will be bleeding if they don't have good soccer socks on because of how much weight comes into their body. That's a kind of a reconstructive mindset of where the bar should be coming into your body. Think about it when you pull with a trap bar, you don't get any of that feedback. Back to the couch talks, you like it a lot better? Yeah, well, those were good for the podcast, and we might start the podcast up again, but right now I don't have a film guy that can shoot the podcast stuff, but I love doing the in-person podcast type shit. It's just hard to get it all set up and find somebody to help me with it. I've been following your workout warm-up from the last 6 months and improved a lot. Thank you for that. In my gym, we don't have the Hatfield squat. Can you recommend an alternative? I'm a professional strength coach, Alexi. The guy, 6'5", 225. I can bench 200, but can't pull up. Yeah, you'll get to it. The pull-ups can take time. But again, you just kind of answered something that I was talking about in one of my short videos. You saw me doing, I think, 10 pull-ups. We don't put pull-ups in a bunch, so if I do pull-ups consistently, I can get over 20 pretty easy, but I try to use it as a shock stimulus and only throw it in maybe every 6 months. The point being is don't worry about your bench until your back strength is up higher, because once your back gets strong, your body's ability to press is going to go way up. So if you don't have a half squat, that'd be tough to do. The only thing I can recommend that's going to be close to that would be like a goblet squat, but you're going to have a problem with the loading. What I would probably try to do is invest in getting a safety bar. If you get a safety bar, I don't see any reason why you can't do the Hatfield squats. Another thing you can do, which is really uncomfortable, is, and it's not going to be exactly the same, you could do a Zercher squat. And that's where you're going to hold the weight into your forearms, into your biceps. So give that a whirl as well. And we still use that as a variation. But Hatfield squats, for most people, teach really, really good technique because you can learn to sit back farther than you naturally would want to without being coached, and you learn to push out. It's kind of like right in between. If I were to go back and start all over again and I were to learn how to squat, I would belt squat for the first 6 months to a year just to learn how to push out and sit back. Then I would tie that into a Hatfield squat. That way I got weight on my back, but I have my form dialed down from my hips and my knees. But now I'm getting the spinal loading and positioning, and then I would work into a free squat, because then that motor pattern is ingrained into my head of how to do it properly. So you would go belt squat, Hatfield squat, free squat. If you did that for a period of time, the outcome of your regular squat would be much higher, for sure. Hurt my back while doing deadlift. I'm not doing it anymore. Any advice? Should do legs. Well, Alexi, you should be still doing deadlifts. If you hurt your back doing deadlifts, again, there's a couple reasons why. Your form sucked, your positioning wasn't any good, or your body wasn't ready to deadlift. But I've been deadlifting over 700 for 26 years now. And yeah, I've had little back twinges and, small little things that set me back a week or two, but don't stop lifting because you get hurt. Usually when you get hurt, it's because something else isn't right. You're not doing something right. My go-to exercises for strength and youth. Well, it's not necessarily strength and youth. It would be strength and athleticism, right? I've ran into a handful of people that were really athletic and could learn movements very quickly. And so their exercises that I would do with them would be much different than people that have, say, trouble learning new exercises. They don't have good body control. Then it's going to be a completely different set of exercises. So although your mindset's good, your categorization of what you're going to teach exercises based on youth it's not a good idea, because somebody can be 23 years old and completely, inadequate with their body's ability to control movements. So you have to be careful with that. What you need to be doing is how fast does somebody learn and what's their technique look like. That is what separates which movements I would pick. No problem, Anjumina. Anjumina 821. If a disc shifts, no, I'm not saying to push it. What we have to figure out is, why is your disc shifting? Do you have ligament laxity? Do you have poor positioning? You're not getting my point. My point is that discs don't just slip for no reason. They slip because something is not technically right most of the time, unless you have some kind of a genetic disorder. No problem, Michael Young. So we got to figure out how and why that disc is slipping. And then we got to work around it until it's solidified, and then we go back into the compound movements. So again, my guesstimate, Alexi, is if I were to watch a video of you deadlifting, I'm going to see something that I don't want to see. So again, I find for most people that the trap bar increases the amount of pressure, decreases the range of motion, and increases more shear and twisting under load because you don't have the bar against your body. So I'm not a huge fan of trap bar deadlifts. We do them occasionally, but not very often. And I don't find that they transfer very well to nearly anything. So I'm not really sure. If you look at a lot of people that advocate trap bar deadlifting over straight bar deadlifting, I've noticed that a handful of times that most of those people can't deadlift anything. They're weak. They train subpar athletes. They're not that good, right? Trap bar deadlift is not safer than a straight bar deadlift when done correctly. Just my personal opinion. And I also feel that if you really want transfer to athletic ability, I find that I follow a little bit more on the guidelines of like what Mike Boyle says, is unilateral training can't be ignored either. So I think if I was going to use, and I had to throw trap bar away, and I was going to use something instead of trap bar, but I didn't want to do stiff-legged, or I didn't want to do barbell deadlifts, I'd be doing a lot of step-ups, a lot of lateral lunges, a lot of things that require balance, coordination, and capacity, which would be a lot of unilateral training. I've surpassed my grip strength with my deadlift RDL. You're going to have to slow down and take time. This is my personal opinion. Red leg. What's up, Grady? Your hands are not surpassing your deadlift. In my opinion, your hands are usually the limiting factor for your back. So what you find is that once you can't hold it anymore, it's the body's governor to letting you know that the lower back is not ready for more pressure. I think it's a feedback loop that when your hands are starting to become the limiting factor, your lower back's also the limiting factor at the same time. And you notice that hand strength takes a long time to develop. What else takes a long time to develop? Lower back strength. So I find that if your hand is a limiting factor, that's a good thing, because it probably means your back's not ready for more. So again, I wouldn't worry about your grip strength. Deadlift with your RDLs, in my opinion, if your grip is giving out, that means your back's not ready to go up heavier either. And that's kind of a protective mechanism that the body brings in as like a defensive loop that shuts the hands down. So in my opinion, when your hands can't hold it, your back's not ready for it. That's usually what I always try to say. And that's also why a lot of the times with my tactical athletes, like guys I'm getting ready to train here in like a half an hour, they pull everything double overhand unless we're maxing. Not a huge fan of the leg press machine. I think the best way to do it is probably single leg, or you could do it Mike O'Hearn style where you lay on your side and kind of push your knee out. I've done those with O'Hearn before and they work really well. But you got to remember that in daily life, and this is just my opinion, in daily life you're never fixed into a machine. And so when you're training muscle groups to not have any control or any stabilization or any coordination, which is a leg press versus a squat. The leg press, you might put on more muscle, you might put on the same amount of muscle maybe, but the muscle's not going to be usable for much, you know? And so what you want to do is increase. I'm always about increasing stability. And so I would much rather see somebody doing a bamboo bar with hanging kettlebells, squatting, than doing a leg press. Not because they can move more weight, it's because the exercise is still developing multiple qualities of human movement, versus the leg press is just kind of lock in and do it. And I know why people do leg presses, because they think it's safer, but in reality, I don't think it is. Yeah, closed chain is greater than open chain for sure. It's a benefit to training with straps with your grip and the limiting factor. No, in my opinion, no. I think that now, if you look back at some of my shorts, you'll see me doing a farmer's carry, which we don't do very often. The week 1, I did it with straps, and week 2, I did it without. The only reason I did it with straps week 1 was I was gauging my tiredness, because I'd already deadlifted double overhand, and I was doing 365 for speed sets. And so I didn't know how much my hands had left. So again, it wasn't necessarily that my grip couldn't do it, because I didn't want the overall cumulative fatigue. But I find that the biggest thing you guys can develop in the gym is grip strength. Think about what you can do with super strong hands. Like, in my opinion, having strong hands is probably one of the most beneficial things to weight training that you could possibly do. Why would you want to negate that, right? You know, and that becomes back down to, are you training for overall physical human performance or just aesthetics? Because in my opinion, straps, if you're using, say, for RDLs or good mornings or deadlifts or whatever, you're separating that defensive loop to your lower back getting hurt. Because I feel like, again, like we're talking about, your hands are the limiting factor. It means your lower back's the limiting factor too. And both of them take, in my opinion, the equal amount of time to grow. If you want really strong hands, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. If you want really strong lower back, you're looking at least that much time, if not more. Oh, your grip machine. Yeah, so the grip machine you can buy on WenningStrength.com. The design is not anything revolutionary. What's revolutionary about it is the fact that there's really no maintenance to it. And I've had the same one in the gym for at least 10 years, and we haven't wore it out. So what I like about that grip machine is that the actual tube handles that you're holding are fairly small, so you can get a really, really tight squeeze onto the machine. And it really builds your grip up super strong. But there was no thought process on how I designed it. What I wanted is not take up a lot of room, work really well, and not wear out. So again, I think it's one of those machines that most people need in their facility that would help that grip problem get fixed a lot faster. I think one of the negative side effects that we've seen from strongman deadlifting popularity like Hafthor Bjorgesson and the Beast and those other guys is you notice they use a 2 foot longer bar than a powerlifter uses, and they're allowed to use straps to deadlift. What's more impressive to me is watching a guy like Colton Edelbright deadlifting close to 1,100 pounds with bare hands. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like, I remember not too long ago when if you pulled 900 pounds in a full meet, that was psychotic. Like, there weren't very many people alive that could do that. And there still isn't today, to be honest with you. But the point being is, I think we have seen that straps and barehanded, when trained correctly, are almost equal. If we look at Colton Edelbright underweighing Hafthor by close to 200 pounds and deadlifting nearly the same amount of weight with no straps, I don't even see there being a comparison. Reverse curls and one-arm farmer's carry are a staple. Yeah, those are good. Those are good too. Reverse curls build the brachialis, which is that muscle there. One-arm farmer's carry are called suitcase carries. And to be honest with you, I like those better than farmer's carries because you have to maintain a core tightness way stiffer when you're only holding one side because it has to counterbalance. Whereas the farmer's walk is mostly compressive, but you don't get a lot of that left to right coordination tie-in to the oblique and the transverse abdominis. So yeah, if you're going to do anything that you like to do farmer's carries for grip, say, do it one arm at a time with dumbbells or kettlebells or some heavy implement and watch how much harder your abs have to work, right? Reverse grip bench. We played around with it quite a bit when I was younger. If you watch guys like my friend Michael Hearn, they do a reverse grip bench fairly regular. I think it comes down to flexibility, but I also think it comes down to the level of advancement you are in technique, because I wouldn't advise doing a reverse grip bench if you're a beginner, because of the ability to drop it over your neck or your face is a definite real issue. Same thing with thumbless grip. I'm not a huge fan of training or utilizing thumbless grip other than it's just a safety parameter, right? And you can't grip the bar. But the reverse grip, if you have the mobility, is a decent training tool. But what I find is as your bench gets stronger, so, when my bench, say, 22 years ago, 25 years ago, over 500, I started to lose the capacity for my hands to bench backwards because everything was so built to bench press with a straight bar that it just felt insanely awkward and tight to go reverse. And so I think it's going to depend on your amount of mobility and the amount of control you have with the bar, and also the quality of spotters that you have. But it doesn't mean that the reverse grip is a bad exercise per se. If you go back 30 years, Anthony Clark, which a lot of you guys probably don't know who that is, but Anthony Clark, if I remember correctly, was the first guy to bench over 700 pounds. He did it reverse grip, but he was also like 5'6", 380, and so his range of motion was really short. But yeah, he was one of the first guys to bench in the sevens, and he did it reverse grip, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Grip strength and elbow pain. That's a good question. I would say yes, because the stronger your forearms are, right, the bigger and stronger all this is, the more it's protective of the elbow. But without looking at an MRI or an x-ray to see if you have some kind of a bone deformity or a ligament or a tendon that's messed up or maybe not formed correctly, or maybe it's been previously injured, it doesn't always mean that grip strength will help it. But in my opinion, if it's just something that's healable, the stronger your hands are, I think it will help your elbow for sure. Good questions today, guys. You guys are doing good. Just make sure you guys hit the like button. I don't know why YouTube's made it to where you gotta go find the like button, but If you guys hit more likes on this, it'll help me out with reach on this video. I'd like to get these treadmill talks up a lot higher. I've considered actually stopping doing them just because I think it actually hurts my algorithm and my channel just because they just get such low views. But it's a way for me to pass time on the treadmill while I'm walking before I work. So kettlebell and sometimes make the stability of the carry. Yeah, using a band with hanging kettlebells with the suitcase carries is awesome. We used to do that quite a bit, maybe about 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah, hit the damn like button, yeah, for sure. I don't know why they've made it difficult. Like now I can't type back an answer. It won't let me type anything. And the like button is like impossible to find. I like to program the grip machine into my warm-ups, but I use it for accessories too. So a lot of times I'll do 4 sets of 25 grip before I'm doing deadlifting or squatting, just to get my hands warmed up and stronger. But a lot of times too, I'll do it after deadlifts and I'll go heavy as hell and keep the reps around 10 or 12. I find that hand strength tends to grow faster with moderate to higher reps, and that's just me personally. But I think you're doing stuff around 10 to 12 is probably going to be your best bet. If you're trying to warm up to get your hands stronger without affecting main lifts, you probably want to do something around sets of 25. Yeah, 3 buttons on the top right, yep. So, I know Ahern is a proponent of only incline bench if he's not doing reverse grip. Yeah, you know, inclines have validity when you're talking about aesthetics. But in my personal opinion, I'm not so sure that inclines are the best thing that you can do for your shoulder over a long period of time. Now, if you're trying to just look like a magazine guy and you don't really care about shoulder health or any of that other shit, I would say you probably need to be doing most of your work on an incline so your pec actually fills out the top of the clavicle. It gives it more of a bigger sweep. But if you're looking for shoulder health and maximum bench press strength, I'm not so sure that inclines might be the best way, because if you think about it, it'll teach you to bench over your face. And a good bencher will bench over his chest. And so what I have found with training is that if I put in inclines too often or too much, it starts affecting my flat bench press form and it starts making me use more anterior delt. So again, O'Hearn's probably one of the only bodybuilders that I would probably listen to with training, because how long he's lasted, how good he's looked for how long, and how strong he is for being a bodybuilder more than a powerlifter. But using inclines all the time, I wouldn't say would be the best bet for most people's shoulders health. Yeah, shoulder bone shape affects everything, but especially overhead pressing. And exactly, the hips for the squat are the same way. But I find that for most people, more so than hips, is that the overhead press is more damaging than good for the shoulder. I remember Louis telling me this when I was a teenager, because I came from the old school where we did a lot of seated and standing military presses to build my bench. And my bench did get up to 500. But the problem was I was already creating at 19. I already had little shoulder impingement issues. My shoulders were always achy, you know. And when I switched over to more of Louis' thought process on how to train, which was nothing overhead or very rarely, tricep dominant pressing, all my shoulder pain went away. And within a matter of 5 or 6 years, I was benching 600. Do I feel that I would have been able to get to a 600-pound raw bench by doing it the old way with lots of military presses? Absolutely not. I'd have been grenaded. I'd have been completely done bench pressing heavy by my mid to late 20s if Louis wouldn't have taught me a better way. And so I'm not saying that if you're in strongman and you have to do it for your sport, that's a completely different story. But if you're doing military presses because of vanity or because of trying to build your bench press, I think there's better ways to do it that'll save your shoulders. And so regardless of whether your shoulder is in a good bone shape or not, I still think the risk to benefit ratio is just not there to do it. No, I think it's because, it's interesting. So when I was in grad school, I had to take pre-med anatomy for my biomechanics class. And the guy that was a teacher was a retired surgeon. And he did a lot of shoulder surgery, shoulder replacements, things of that nature. And I remember having a question in class, and it was coming from Louis. Hey, I've heard doing a lot of overhead stuff, not real good for your shoulder joint for weightlifting. Can you elaborate on that? He goes, come to class early the next day, which was like Monday. So 2 or 3 days go by. I go back to class and I'm there an hour early. He's got a cadaver laid out and he's got the shoulder all split open, and he's showing me the arm overhead. And he's basically showing me that the shoulder is out of socket when it's overhead. And he said 80% of the shoulder surgeries that he had done were for people that were overusing overhead movements like drywallers, electricians, iron workers, pipe fitters. And he goes, in that position, you have very poor leverage and the bone is actually grinding itself to a pulp overhead. So I thought that was really interesting. And that stuck with me ever since I was, 22, 23 years old, which reinforced what Louis was saying the whole time. Yeah, I know Stuart McGill. We're pretty good friends. Yeah, supposedly he doesn't like reverse hypers. Yeah, it's interesting. We've had small debates in person over that. And I understand his reasoning for not liking reverse hypers. But, I don't know. If you look at a lot of the guys at Westside Barbell, including myself, that have stapled on reverse hypers for now 3 decades, you would think if the reverse hypers were bad for you, that everybody that's used them in a heavy fashion or a world-class fashion would have back problems, right? The answer is we don't. And I think the problem is, if you look at how the spine flexion and extends on a reverse hyper, if you were in a standing position, it probably wouldn't be good for it. But in a laying down position, it's actually restorative. And I can just go by what I'm telling you, which is I feel that the reverse hyper is probably one of the best tools you can use for the lower back. And it keeps the spinal muscles in the glutes and the hamstrings super hot, and it's a way that your body is not normally used to moving. If you look at a 45-degree back extension, you're moving your upper body, not your legs. You look at a lot of different exercises, you're moving your upper body, not your legs. So that's why they call it a reverse hyper. But yeah, Stuart McGill and I don't share similar views on similar things, but I think it's hard to refute the amount of people that have used reverse hypers and deadlifted over, say, 700 pounds, 800 pounds, and their backs are still in pretty good shape. Mark Ripito says overhead press is great for shoulders, but there's limitations, and I have limitations in my education as well. But it's also why I push my strength limits as far as I possibly could. In my opinion, Mark Ripto's weakness is he's never super strong. His best back squat is not even my best bench press. And so I think with that being said, the problem, and again, it's not an ego trip, it's the fact of how many years I've been able to stay at that strength level and not have any shoulder problems. I don't think Mark Ripto's done anything competitive in lifting in maybe 40 years. And the problem is overhead press is good for developing shoulders, but it's not good for shoulder joint health. That's just my personal opinion. Matt, was your bias against Olympic squats that you didn't have shallow hip sockets lead to labral tears? No. Olympic style squats teach people to use muscles that they already know how to use. So if I shift way forward Olympic style, I'm loading the quadricep. That's what I'm doing. I'm chasing away from hamstring and glute tightness, and I'm running to the quadricep. Most people know how to use their knee. They don't know how to use their hips. And so if you look at the number one issue for lower back pain is hip mobility, why wouldn't you squat with a more vertical shank to increase hip mobility, increase hip and hamstring strength, so that your posterior chain is more balanced? So what I find is that Olympic style squats tend to make the lower back an issue because it's putting all the pressure and shear force at the knee. That's just my theory on it. We did some biomechanical studies on it in my master's program, and you find that the Olympic style squat, it's just so much more shear at the knee, and I don't find that people have an issue turning on quadriceps. What I find is that their quadricep to hamstring ratio is garbage, and if you learn how to squat correctly, you can balance that out. Clean and press exercise in a month, wouldn't use it much at all, to be honest with you. I think the most benefit out of Olympic lifts is just doing the high pull, right, at different positions. Snatch, grip, cleans. If you go back and watch some of the YouTube live videos that we posted in the last 3 or 4 months, you'll see we're doing clean pulls. After that point, your amount of power that you're developing is much lower. It's not really any benefit to it as far as force production. So what I find is doing clean pulls or snatch pulls are your best bet for developing Olympic lifting power without Olympic lifting mileage. So not a big fan of clean presses at all. And I find that people that do quite a bit of that tend to have a lot of issues. Lately I've been using the abduction adduction machine to actually help open my legs before squatting. It seems to have beneficial. Oh yeah, abduction adduction machines are amazing for opening up your hips for squats. So those exercises aren't just for girls, that's for sure. If you guys can, as I said, go hit the like button. Is there any truth to what Ben Patrick says about full knee ROM protection? No, actually it's contrary. When my book comes out, I wrote almost a half a chapter on kind of refuting that. Here's the problem, is that just like every other joint, when you're born, you might have small irregularities in the joint and the structure. Doing things in extreme ranges of motion are just going to wear it out faster. So you have to make sure that that's not you. The next thing is that once you get past a certain bend in the knee, the shear force rises extensively, and then your condyles, which is the femur knots on the end, they really don't have a lot of support on the meniscus. And so, although I think it's a good variation to train occasionally, saying it's a one-size-fits-all type movement is probably a bad idea. You're telling me that neurological development from doing power cleans is more than doing speed squats or speed deadlifts? I don't think so. I can guarantee you that in my prime, I could move 315 on speed squats faster than most people could do power cleans. Yeah, 315 bench natty is awesome, dude. 315 bench is really good. It's a milestone. I mean, if you look at the entire world population, there's a very small percentage of people that can bench press 315, so that's good. Now your next goal should be 405. Would you say he's spreading harmful information then? Yes and no, Patrick, I think some of his, and again, I don't read a bunch of his stuff because when he started telling me that those high knee flexion squats were better than anything else, I automatically kind of wrote him off as a dumbass. But if you look at it like his whole system as a whole, he talks a lot about developing hamstrings, like glute ham raises and stuff like that. So I agree with that. But what I find is that people that squat with my technique, for example, if I want to move my feet in close and go to an elevated heel and let my knee shift over my toe, I can still hit a big number. I don't need to squat that way to be good at it. It's hard because this is the problem with social media. People that end up getting millions of followers don't necessarily know what the hell they're talking about, right? I think we've seen that with a handful of people in the last month or so. Look at, and again, I don't know him that well, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But you look at like Jeff Nippert, for example. What is Jeff Nippert's educational background? He doesn't have a master's in anything exercise science. He doesn't have a PhD in anything exercise science, and only talks about science-based training. Now, you can talk about science-based training, and that's great, but my point is like, when are people going to wake up? They busted Mike Israetel's balls for a lot of spelling grammars, which I agreed. His electoral people that he put on the board for that paper, they should have picked that stuff up. But it doesn't negate the fact that he took 3 or 4 years of classes to earn that PhD. You know, the paper, the dissertation is just kind of the icing on the cake at that point. You know, it's getting through the schooling that's a bitch. I mean, I'm getting ready to start my PhD schooling in like a week and a half, and you know, I'm shitting fucking bullets, man. I gotta take like an 800 level ethics class. They make you take it by itself. I haven't been in school in 20 years. So think about, like, Israel's at least went through the schooling to be considered an expert. He's competed in a lot of pro or bodybuilding shows, which gives him some expert opinions on that. You know, so again, don't follow people because they have millions of followers and just think because everybody's following them that they got the, well, Chris J, as I found out through my Patreon channel, I can't talk about peptides because for some reason Patreon has put my channel on a reserve, basically blocked me out of it because I had posted about BPC 157 and TB 500. So I don't have any thoughts on peptides right now. Do I feel any vindication? Kind of depends on what you mean. I don't feel any vindication. I think that if somebody wants to bring up somebody else's educational accolades and destroy them, they need to have accolades higher than that person, or at least equal. You know, if another PhD wanted to attack Mike Israel, then so be it. That's their business. But what you find, like the same thing that happened with me, with Bromley, is you got people that haven't even graduated an undergraduate degree talking shit about somebody that has a master's degree that went and got a professional doctorate. I never said I had a PhD, although unbeknownst to him, I was working toward getting an application and approved to start my PhD in October. A professional doctorate is a doctorate that you utilize experience, what you've done in the field, and then you have to pass some preliminary classes, which again weren't that big of a deal, but when you're running a $1 million business like what I do, it's a big deal to have that much time to do it. And yeah, I feel bad for Israel. I don't necessarily feel bad for Jeff Nipper because he doesn't have any credentials to be talking about what he's talking about, at least in my opinion. But Mike Israel went through the schooling. If he was at East Tennessee at the time that Mike Stone was there, Mike Stone is a legend in the strength and conditioning field. So again, small little clerical errors, I'm not sure necessarily justified by busting somebody's balls. But again, I haven't looked into the whole thing and I don't know. But what it has done is made me look at what I want to do for my dissertation and make sure that none of that happens with my stuff, right? It's just, we're just so nitpicky. And what you find is that the people that are nitpicky are the ones, nobody ever punches down. They always punch up, right? You know, Bromley has way more followers on YouTube than I have, but business-wise, he's not even close to me, right? The people that are trying to attack Israel are not making near the money that Mike's making and don't have near the drive in the field that Mike has. So I feel bad for Mike in certain examples of that. But again, what are you going to do? You and Brian Carroll are the only legitimate people on the social media. Yeah, Carroll was around the game a long time, came back from a lower back problem. I got a lot of respect for Brian Carroll for sure. Well, Wolverine Machine, I would try to hop on one of our training apps or come on to online coaching, and we have to see how we get that bench from 315 to 405, because it's not going to be easy, but if you've already got the diligence to make 315, I think you got the work ethic to make 405. But online coaching will be your best way for us to help you with that. 17-year-old daughter has gotten interested in lifting after seeing my transformation from following your program. Man, awesome. Do you have any recommendations for a program for her general strength? Well, the first thing I would do, Redlig 1013, come in and have her do an assessment. I've done that with like 6 or 8 different kids in the last year or so, and to figure out where they need to go and what programming they need to be doing. If she's 17 and she's really interested in lifting, your best bet's to come on to online coaching unless one of our professionals, myself, Wade, or John. Wade used to play for the Dolphins and Bengals, has been a strength coach since the early 80s. And John is the head strength coach for track at University of Kansas, and he's been doing this for 35 or 40 years too. So our online coaching experience, in my opinion, is second to none. We have over 100 years experience combined. Yeah, censorship sucks for sure. Yeah, intermediate lifter. I don't know what it was with Patreon. They flagged my channel. Hopefully they give it back. But I don't see the problem in talking to people, or at least exposing information on peptides. And a lot of that stuff I do behind my paywall, right? That's interesting because peptides have become Chris Duffin's whole channel. I know. I'm doing my PhD at Concordia St. Paul. It's going to be a PhD in kinesiology. Do you think there's a possibility people like Ben lies about injury history? As I educate myself more in the health, it does seem to... Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people lie, but they position themselves to look better than they are. And I think we all have an issue with that, right? And again, you look at a lot of the real people like myself that's broke all-time world records and went to school and going back to school. Like the general population doesn't want to hold that in any high regard. They want to hold people that spend thousands of dollars a month in marketing and say they have millions of followers, and those are the people they consider experts, which is really, really bad. I think what we need to be doing is looking at people's physical and educational accolades, right? There's a handful of people that are more popular than me on YouTube that have lifted a fraction of what I've lifted and have a literal fraction of the amount of schooling that I have. And I don't understand how normal people even want to listen to it. But, oh well. Hey, Burnham, if you want to come and bench with us yesterday and then hop on the treadmill and walk now almost an hour, have at it, buddy. I'm doing this just to flush my muscles and restore. Come on to online coaching, Alvin Belly. I'm going to currently hit 380 bench. I want to get to 405. Yeah, 39. Yeah, you still got plenty of time. I was at my strongest at right around between 37 and 41 is when I felt my best. So great for talking. Hope to see you guys soon. Hit the like button if you guys can before I close this out. I only got 19 likes, but we got like 28 people watching. Brian Johnson, anti-aging lifestyle. I don't know if I've read into that. The only Brian Johnson I know is the lead singer from AC/DC, and I'm sure he's not doing anti-aging shit, so I don't know. If you guys can, like I said, go and hit the like button. All right, I'm going to hop off here. I got to get to work. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for talking in. See you later. You're welcome. No problem, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. This was an amazing group, and I'm on this channel at this time every Thursday, so hopefully I'll see you guys then. Appreciate it. And if you guys can, go and report on the Patreon channel and tell them that Wenning needs his page back. You know, maybe if more people start chiming in on that, they'll listen up. So we'll talk to you guys.